Hello and welcome to Giant Mess, a sloppy sports and entertainment talk show that's all over the map. From New York Giants football to Mets baseball, movies and TV shows to funny stories and life lessons. It's hosted by a Giant Mess. That's me, the real cinch, Neal Lynch. I'm a former college quarterback and pitcher, a film and media studies major. Didn't know they had that at Johns Hopkins University, a private research university known for producing doctors and lawyers, and I didn't become either. And instead, I'm an overanalyst. I like to overthink things. It's what I do. This old mental, it's old. it tends to overwork itself. On today's episode, we're going to be reviewing The Flash, the second to last installment in the failed, much maligned DCEU franchise timeline. Did it live up to the hype? Did it live up to the expectations? We'll look at how the cast performed, who stood out amongst the cast, who left a little to be desired. We'll break down the plot, take a look at how we got to where we are with the DC universe, the film timeline for The Flash, break down how the box office turned out, where this movie landed, some trivia, how the critics viewed it. Was it there's a lot of talk going around about The Flash, and it's not all great. But I'm here to say there were some bright spots. So with that, let us get started. The synopsis for The Flash, the 2023 movie, starring Ezra Miller and Michael Keaton, Sasha Calle, Michael Shannon, Ron Livingston. Here's the synopsis. Worlds collide in The Flash when Barry uses his superpowers to travel back in time in order to change the events of the past. But when his attempt to save his family inadvertently alters the future, Barry becomes trapped in a reality in which General Zod has returned, threatening annihilation, and there are no superheroes to turn to. That is until Barry can coax a very different Batman out of retirement and rescue an imprisoned Kryptonian, albeit not the one he's looking for. Ultimately, to save the world that he is in and return the future that he knows, Barry's only hope is to race for his life. But will making the ultimate sacrifice be enough to reset the universe? Bum, bum, bum. Movie was rated PG-13. It does contain partial nudity, which I almost forgot about. We get to see a whole lot of Ezra Miller's very sculpted body. And my God, what I would give to have that kind of metabolism. There is some strong language, which I think some parents weren't too fond of. It's directed by Andy Muschietti, who directed It and It Chapter 2. He does make a cameo at the end of the film as a man eating a hot dog outside the courtroom, which Barry steals and results in a very confused look. Robert Zemeckis, Sam Raimi, Matthew Vaughn, and Mark Webb were the frontrunners to direct this film. If you're unfamiliar with those names, Robert Zemeckis directed Romancing the Stone, 1984 flick with Michael, with the throat thing, Douglas. And I think it was Diane Turner. Is that a name? She's got a great voice. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? One of my favorite films, 1988. I'm sure that had some kind of profound effect on my childhood. And of course, Back to the Future, which is referenced in this movie a few times, and is basically, that is the plot. He also directed Forrest Gump and Contacts, so this dude has a reputation for handling emotional moving pictures. Sam Raimi, of course, did Evil Dead 2, Darkman, Army of Darkness, and the Spider-Man trilogy. Matthew Vaughn is known for producing such films as Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, Snatch, directed the crime thriller Layer Cake with Daniel Craig, pre-James Bond Daniel Craig, and Kick-Ass, superhero comedy. And another superhero movie, X-Men First Class, which kind of rebooted the X-Men franchise. And then, of course, Mark Webb. He directed over 100 music videos before he had his directorial feature-length film directorial debut with 500 Days of Summer. One of my favorite romantic comedies and one of the top romantic comedies of all time. Please feel free to at me. He later directed The Amazing Spider-Man and its 2014 sequel, both starring Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. Raimi and Webb passed on this project. Christopher Miller and Phil Lord, who were probably best known for producing the Lego Batman movie, and were also in consideration to direct. They also produced the Spider-Verse movies that have been going off the charts. Many would say 2 of the best superhero movies of all time. Ironic that I would bring that up when, and we'll get to why that's ironic with The Flash. But my daughter has been watching the Lego Batman movie almost on loop since she was 3. So they got something cooking right over there in the Lord Miller Productions facility. It's produced by The Flash is produced by Barbara Muschietti, who also produced It and It Chapter 2. She's also the executive producer of Lock and Key, the TV series that I believe is on Netflix. It's been running for a couple seasons now. The other producer is Michael Disco, who's produced more than 35 films, among them being Rampage, Game Night, The Disaster Artist, Central Intelligence, San Andreas. So there's a theme here with The Rock. Interesting, considering The Rock's relationship with DC Films, DC Universe, DCEU. Horrible Bosses, A Very Harold and Kumar Christmas, and 4 Christmases. So Disco knows Christmas, okay? The Flash was written by Christina Hodson, who had previously written Birds of Prey and Bumblebee. 2 films that I liked. Bumblebee, I think, is more highly regarded and critically praised than Birds of Prey. I would say the strong points of Birds of Prey are at basically any scene with Margot Robbie. She was just awesome as Harley Quinn. And I really hope they're able to keep her as Harley Quinn moving through into this next phase for DC films. But pretty much anyone outside of Harley Quinn, with the exception of Mary Elizabeth Winstead as the Huntress, somewhat fell flat for me. So those were what stood out from Birds of Prey. I think Ewan McGregor. And you can go to my Birds of Prey movie review to get the full scoop there. But 2 pretty decent superhero movies, so she's got some good writing chops for this genre. The story is by John Francis Daly, who you might recognize as one of the actors on Freaks and Geeks, a very popular TV series that only ran for 1 season. And also played Mitch in the movie Waiting, about the service industry. Most servers, waiters, waitresses, starring Ryan Reynolds, had Dane Cook in it. One of the more underrated comedies of the 2000s. There was a good stretch, a year stretch, where that's all we quoted was stuff from Waiting. And we were giving people the Batwing, another ironic connection to the Flash movie. is the crew of the restaurant in Waiting giving each other the Batwing. And if you don't know what that means, I don't know if I should go into it right here, right now. You should probably look it up. The story is by John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein. They're kind of a writing duo. They did most recently did Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves, which I hope to review shortly. I thought that was kind of met and exceeded my expectations. Vacation Friends, which I've seen being really pushed heavily on Hulu. I've come very close to watching, but I can't bring myself to do it. I don't know why. Spider-Man Homecoming, Vacation, which was the reboot of the Vacation series starring Chevy Chase. Horrible Bosses 2, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2, The Incredible Burt Wonderstone, and Horrible Bosses. So they have a pretty lengthy and notable resume. And at one point, they were actually set to direct the Flash during pre-production, but had to drop out due to creative differences. There are a lot of creative differences over this movie, over the course of its existence. We'll go over the timeline shortly. And then there was another story by credit here for Joby Harold, who most recently wrote Transformers: Rise of the Beasts, which is, I think, landed pretty well with audience, not so much with critics. And there was an interesting end to that film that could launch that franchise in a new direction. So you can see why these people are involved with this project. This project has kind of morphed and evolved over the past decade or so. And these people were brought in at various points for reasons that we'll go over. Now, this movie, The Flash, released over Father's Day weekend 2023, Has a fairly long runtime, 2 hours, 24 minutes. I know that was a main criticism for a lot of critics. I personally didn't feel like it dragged too much, and I don't feel like that runtime was that long. Could you have cut 5, 10, 15 minutes? Maybe. But even with cutting that, there's still a lot to be said about the storyline, the plot, and how it developed and rolled out over the course of the film. And so maybe that runtime, we could still have that runtime, but maybe just maneuver some things here and there. Obviously distributed by Warner Brothers and had reported budget of 200 to 220 million. And there are a couple ways to react to that budget. One is that seems a bit high. And if you have watched the movie, you would say, where did that budget go? But when we get back to the backstory of this movie and all the trials and tribulations and hurdles that it had to overcome just to get to the big screen, the silver screen, that budget makes sense. Because it seems like they had to do a lot of revisions and a lot of changes, and it was going on basically almost 5 to 6 months before its release. So they were kind of, right up until to the end there, they were spending money on this movie to make it what it is. There was like an unfinished edit of the film in like late 2022, and that's when a lot of the buzz started to generate about the movie being the greatest of all time. We'll get into that. So that budget makes sense when you know the backstory. Absent, if this were the normal production where everything goes according to plan smoothly, which when does that happen? You'd be like, really? They spent that much? But knowing all the crap that they went through, it's like, yeah, that's kind of where it landed. So I mentioned Ezra Miller is returning as Barry Allen, aka The Flash, police forensic investigator for Central City. Miller also portrays an alternate younger version of himself from 2013, which we'll review when we get down to the plot. And there's also we'll save that for later. So one of the reasons why I think this movie failed to meet expectations at critically and maybe at the box office is because of Ezra Miller and because of all the shit that he's been going, or I should say they, because they identify as they. They're not gendered. They're not man or or woman. They are neither. So there's if you're interested, you can read his their Wikipedia page. It's lengthy and it details a lot of what they have gone through over the past few years. But in a nutshell, they've been accused of committing disorderly conduct, which sounds bad, but it's like they had pot. They got caught with pot before pot was cool with the cops. Harassment, assault, burglary, and it resulted in arrests and citations. Also been accused of grooming minors. So I don't want to go into details, and it would take too long, but there's a lot going on there. And I think because of their actions, there was I think there was a decent percentage of fans, non-fans, casual fans who decided to boycott and say, no, we're not going to put up with this. We're not going to glorify and support someone who has done these awful things. Understandable. So, but from DC Films' perspective, with all that going on, they have already poured and invested so much into this, and they had already canceled a Batwoman movie and lost, I don't know, 80 some odd $100 million on that. Were they going to take another bath on this when they were so heavily invested? How would they? And ironically, there's a scene in this movie that kind of relates to this dilemma that they're in. Do we replace this actor? How do we replace this actor when we film so much of this actor in this role? Is it possible? Is it going to look good if we digitally do it? To reshoot this whole thing is going to cut. So they kind of, it is what it is, which is an interesting theme for this movie. It is what it is. Not every problem has a solution, and that's a major mantra of this movie. And it doesn't just apply to the characters in the story in this movie. It applies to the actors in real life of this movie. Ben Affleck returns as Bruce Wayne, aka Batman. Affleck has said that he had a great time reprising the role of Bruce Wayne and Batman for this film, as opposed to the infamously troubled production of Justice League, which we've touched on before with Zack Snyder's daughter passing, him having to step away, Joss Whedon stepping in, and him being accused of racism by Ray Fisher, who played Cyborg. Whew. The drama that's happening outside of the actual movies themselves are almost, sadly, more entertaining than what is going on film. But with this appearance, I found this interesting. With this appearance, Ben Affleck will play the role of Bruce Wayne or Batman 4 times in live action films, more than any other actor for that role. However, he is the only Batman to not have his own standalone movie. And he was supposed to write and direct The Batman, which would have been his solo standalone movie. And of course, he walked away from that, citing creative differences or just exhaustion at that point, having to deal with the studio. He just was done with it at that point. And so that's when they brought in Matthew Reeves, who then cast Robert Pattinson as Batman. And I mean, we saw what happened. I mean, the Batman was, I loved the Batman, and I thought it did wonders for the character, for the universe, a different take. It's not exactly going to fit within what James Gunn has planned. And it's going to be part of this DC Elseworlds thing, which I'm not too crazy about, but we'll see how it pans out. So I thought that was interesting. Sasha Calle as Kara Zor-El, aka Supergirl. She plays Kal-El's cousin, Superman's cousin, who has powers and abilities and a costume that are pretty much synonymous with Superman. Kai is the first Latina actress to portray Supergirl, which is interesting. And she's described the Supergirl costume as androgynous, which I can see, but I don't know about you guys, but her costume was very nice. And that's not the first word that comes to mind when I see her in that costume. It just looks great. It looks flawless. They were able to evoke Henry Cavill's design along with Laura Lane Kent's costume from the Injustice universe, which I have not seen, but I've heard tremendous things about. And it's also similar to John Kent's Superman costume from the comics. So who is Sasha Calle? Who would you know her from or remember her from? Well, not a whole lot. She's young, and she played Lola on The Young and the Restless for like 3 or 4 seasons. So I think this is her breakout role. I think she did an outstanding job as Kara Zor-El, Supergirl. I maybe would have wanted a little bit more from her, a little more, maybe more scenes. But every scene that she was in, it was powerful, captivating, and it hit hard. So I think she knocked it out of the park. We didn't really talk about Ezra Miller's performance, but it's divisive. You have a lot of critics who are saying they were awful. And then you have a lot of critics saying, wow, like the ability to play both roles, the older Barry, the younger Barry, to pull that off was a pretty admirable feat, despite everything that's going on off the screen. And Ben Affleck is Ben Affleck. He's kind of, to navigate Bruce Wayne like he has, he gave it certainly more of a darker, grim tone than a lot of the other Batmans, even Christian Bale. I think Christian Bale, you would say, is like when there was 2 Bruce Waynes, right? With Christian Bale, it was like the public facing Bruce Wayne, where I'm going to pretend I'm this like billionaire, arrogant billionaire playboy prick. And then there's the behind closed doors Bruce Wayne, who's a little more pensive and calculating and serious. Ben Affleck as Bruce Wayne was not as the Bruce Wayne he played in public was not as smarmy as the Christian Bale one. And I think that his interpretation of the character was more akin to like, hey, this guy has seen and done a lot of like horrific shit. And so that has to have some kind of effect on his persona, his demeanor, his disposition, his behavior, his attitude. I don't see him. And it makes sense. Like that's got to take your toll. And he plays a slightly older Bruce Wayne, so that's got to take a toll on him. And I think that's reflected in his portrayal of the character. Now, do people necessarily like that approach? I don't know. Was it better than previous Bruce Waynes? Up for debate. But I would say Michael Keaton. We'll get to Michael Keaton in a little bit, but Michael Shannon returns as General Zod. This version of General Zod hails from an alternate timeline where Kara landed on Earth instead of Kal-El. And Michael Shannon received Man of Steel director Zack Snyder's blessing to reprise his role, which is very kind of him. However, I don't know that there weren't a ton of scenes with Michael Shannon as General Zod. And I don't know that we got to see much of his acting chops. And there are some who are saying that Michael Shannon like phoned it in or mailed it in. And I don't necessarily agree with that. Could it have been a better performance? Maybe. But I still buy into him as General Zod. And I think he's a tremendous General Zod. So I don't know that the script or the story necessarily allowed for him to maximize his performance, right? It was kind of limited in what he was given. But what he was given, it's like he's the menacing threat. He's the central antagonist. Now, could they have gone with a different antagonist? For sure. And did they need to revisit the Man of Steel timeline? I could see why they went that route, but maybe not. And so we mentioned Ron Livingston. Ron Livingston is Henry Allen. You might be like, whoa, wait, I thought Billy Crudup was Henry Allen, as he played Henry Allen in the Justice League and in both the Justice League and Zack Snyder's Justice League, and was supposed to return to this role, but dropped out due to scheduling conflicts with The Morning Show, which is on Apple TV, in which he plays a very funny executive who charms and torments Jennifer Aniston. Season 1 was a good watch. I didn't watch season 2, but it's kind of crazy that people are, when you scheduling conflicts, what the scheduling conflict is for, you're like, interesting choice. Okay. So he's replaced by Ron Livingston, who's best known for his work in The Office, but has also done some dramatic work that is pretty good. Maribel Verdú as Nora Allen. That's Henry Allen's wife and Barry Allen's mother. She was Maribel Verdú was in Pan's Labyrinth and was also in And Your Mother Too, or Y Tu Mama Tambien, which came out in 2001. And if your libido's slumping and if you need an erotic reawakening, that movie will kick you right in the tires and let you right in the fires. Like, it will kick your tires and light your fires. It will get the blood flowing, the juices pumping. High recommend for me on that one. Kiersey Clemons returns as Iris West. She plays Iris West as a journalist for the Picture News, which is the major newspaper in Central City and absolutely needs a new name. The Picture News? Come on, guys. And is quote unquote the love interest for Barry. Oh boy. I don't know if there was a ton of chemistry between Ezra Miller and Kiersey Clemons. I think they're both good actors in their own right, but I just did not feel any kind of connection between them at all. I didn't see them as being an item at all. It was just, I don't know. And I feel like maybe that is partially due to Iris West being, it felt so far in the periphery that she just wasn't developed as a character. So she was supposed to be in Justice League, but her scenes were cut. And so she eventually was reintegrated in the Zack Snyder cut, where we get to see the Flash save her from a crash. And they briefly exchange glances as he's flashing by. Michael Keaton, last but not least, Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne, aka Batman, reprises his role from 1989's Batman and 1992's Batman Returns. And this film essentially, they say, retcons the subsequent films Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, where Keaton did not appear, as multiverse variations. Michael Keaton was 71 at the time of this film's release, making him the oldest actor to play Batman in a live-action film or TV series. And I don't think this is a hot take, but this movie, The Flash, solidifies Michael Keaton as the best Batman. His acting, his suit, it just looks awesome. It works, it fits, and maybe it would be interesting to get someone's perspective who hasn't seen Batman or Batman Returns, especially as a child. Because I saw Batman when I was 8, saw Batman Returns when I was 11. Those are like when your memories are getting real strong, formative years. And so that's a major reason. I mean, it's probably the number one reason why I saw this movie, and a lot of people of my age or in that ilk of that time, that era, went to see the movie. Went to see it for Michael Keaton, went to see it for Michael Keaton. I mean, I've seen that left and right. I don't know that anyone's seeing it for Ezra Miller, or Sasha Calle, although hopefully in the future people will go to see movies with Sasha Calle because she like crushed it. So yeah, I'm willing to say that. I know there are people out there who say Christian Bale was the best Batman. So there's that whole duality of like, well, who's the best Bruce Wayne? Who's the best Batman? I think the person that pulls off both very well, the best, in my opinion, Michael Keaton. And it's not even close. Not even close. And I feel for Christian Bale because there were some choices that he had to do that maybe weren't his choices, like the voice. And so I think that's why it kind of knocks him down a peg or two, is because of the voice. But if you take away the voice, maybe he's in the running. But Michael Keaton's a clear cut number one of all the Bruce Waynes and Batmans. So good, even at his age, even after all these years, dusting it off and just knocking it out of the park. And there were a ton of cameos in this movie, and we'll get to that towards the end of the plot, the breakdown of the plot and the storylines. But it was interesting to note that Rob Lowe was approached to play one of the villains in this film. Not quite sure which villain, but very interesting. And I mean, I would have loved that. I'm a modest, tepid Rob Lowe fan. I just like when he shows up on screen, it can't help but like it. So now we're going to dive into the history. How did we get to this place? This very muddled, dark timeline, if you're a DC fan. Well, here we go. 2004, David S. Goyer was attached to direct the film, with Ryan Reynolds set to play, well, is it Barry Allen or Wally West? There's been some conflicting reports here. So David S. Goyer is the writer for Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and I don't know if he did The Dark Knight Rises, but he directed Blade Trinity, which I don't know if that was widely hailed as like a success. It was the last of the Blade trilogy, and it happened to star Ryan Reynolds. So the development for film adaptation of The Flash was revived as the studio was impressed with Goyer's script for Batman Begins, and he was offered the choice of a Flash or Green Lantern film, which is, I mean, you want to talk about sliding doors moments, multiverse type shit. What happens if he picks the Green Lantern and Ryan Reynolds is the Green Lantern? Does that solidify Ryan Reynolds as the Green Lantern? We don't get him as Deadpool. Da 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 da. Whoa. And similarly, what happens if he directs the Flash and we get Ryan Reynolds as the Flash? Where are we at today as a society? You know what I'm saying? In December of 2004, it was announced that Goyer would be writing, producing, and directing. Barry Allen would be a supporting character, and Ryan Reynolds will play Wally West. At least that's what I've read. Wally West, who I'm not familiar with, sad to say, was the third speedster known as the Flash, and the original Kid Flash, the nephew of Iris West, became a founding member of the Teen Titans after Barry's death in Crisis on Infinite Earths. I guess spoiler if you haven't read that comic book that's been out for, 12 years, something like that. So when Goyer left the Flash in 2007, Sean Levy was picked to direct. Levy had just directed Just Married with Ashton Kutcher and Cameron Diaz. Or not Cameron Diaz. That was the other one. Or maybe it wasn't. I don't know. He'd also just directed Cheaper by the Dozen. He has now gone on to produce and direct for Stranger Things, Real Steel, that robot fighting movie with Hugh Jackman, and the Night at the Museum franchise. He also has directed Free Guy and the Atom Project with Ryan Reynolds. So they have a pretty decent relationship there. Adam Brody would have played Barry Allen in the Justice League movie had it been actually gone into production back in the mid-aughts, which and the reason for him backing out was related to a tax credit from Australia or something. I don't believe that as far as I can read it or throw it, which is a weird expression. But apparently that was the scoop on that, I guess. I don't know. It doesn't sound right. But Adam Brody as Barry Allen is a very interesting choice, and I can very easily see that. That's not a stretch for me at all. That's not a Mr. Fantastic stretch at all. Then we had Levy departs for the Night at the Museum franchise. Again, it's like what people opted for instead of this. Like it's interesting in my mind, because in my mind, superhero movies are like the tops, the creme de la creme. Like if you can pull those off, you can see the fruits of your labor. And then it sends your career on a whole nother trajectory. So to turn down this opportunity for the Flash for something like Night at the Museum, which I'm not knocking Night at the Museum franchise. I mean, they're all good for the most part, and they all were tremendously successful at the box office. So ultimately he made the right choice, I guess, because you're starting to get a theme here of how many people departed this project over creative differences or scheduling conflicts. The amount of people that they went through for directors, writers, it's at what they call development hell. And this was probably the worst in terms of development hell, trying to get off the ground. So, if you wonder why you got what you got, if you saw the movie, you're getting a whole lot of reasons. We're not even at 2007. You can already see what the project has gone through already. And maybe this is the standard status quo for Hollywood in general. And a lot of this just doesn't get out in the public. But it does seem like it was long in gestation for probably reasons at the studio. And then for other reasons. This thing went through a couple of events that like are just out of your control. The 2007-2008 WGA strike, which, all right, maybe not so far out of your control. Pay your writers. We're currently in a writer's strike, so it's crazy that we're bringing this up. That's how long this thing was in development. WGA strike in 2007-2008 set it back. And then in February 2010, Greg Berlanti was the leading contender to direct the Flash movie, but instead went on to introduce the Flash TV show on the CW, which launched in 2014. Some of the names that have been tossed around to play Barry Allen in the Flash: Bradley Cooper, Chris Pine, Ryan Quanten, who played one of the Stackhouses on True Blood, Matthew Fox from Lost, and Scott Porter, who played a character on Friday Night Lights, which I have not seen, but it's on my queue. It's in my queue. And ironically ended up doing a lot of voice work for the DC and Marvel properties. So obviously a likable guy that they wanted to get involved. And so, but that cast of characters, that list of actors who were in talks to play Barry Allen or were considered for Barry Allen, that should give you an indication of the timeline. We're in 2023. I'm imagining by the list of these people, Matthew Fox got hot. Lost debuted in 2004, had a run to 2010. So in my mind, maybe towards the end of the Lost run, 2009, 2010, if Matthew Fox is in the mix, that's when I'm picturing these people. Like Chris Pine had his breakout in Star Trek in 2009. Bradley Cooper had his breakout in The Hangover in 2009. So this feels like a list of candidates from 2009, 2010. Here's a list of actresses that were considered for the role of Nora Allen: Julia Roberts, Julianne Moore, Vera Farmiga, Kate Winslet, and Hilary Swank. That sounds like a who's who in the mid-aughts, right? Kate Winslet is probably coming off Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Hilary Swank is probably coming off, not Slumdog Millionaire. Jesus, $1 Million Baby. Boxing movie with Clint Eastwood. Julianne Moore is just awesome in whatever she does. Vera Farmiga might have been when she like really premiered or debuted in The Departed. And Julia Roberts. But that list indicates mid-aughts, mid to late aughts. So this film, even though it had been in the works since 2004, 10 years, batted around for 10 years, the film was first formally officially announced in October 2014 with a release date of 2018 and would have been the 6th installment in the DCEU. And then at San Diego Comic-Con 2017, 3 years later, it was announced that this film would be a loose adaptation of the Flashpoint storyline. So if you're not familiar with the Flashpoint storyline, it's a comic book story arc published by DC Comics that had a limited series and a bunch of tie-in titles, premiered in May of 2011. And just this movie and its relationship to reality is just insane, and mind-boggling and mind-blowing. So the Flashpoint series radically changes the status quo for the DC universe. So it's interesting that it's now the film is now serving as a change to the status quo of the DC universe, movie film universe. And it led to the DC Comics relaunch in 2011, which is fitting for the current DCU being launched and led by James Gunn. The Flashpoint details an altered DC universe in which only Barry Allen seems to be aware of significant differences between the regular timeline and the altered one. But there's still a lot of differences between the Flashpoint comics and the Flashpoint movie, which we'll get into. The main villain in the Flashpoint comics was Eobard Thawne, aka Professor Zoom, an evil Flash from the future, and the entire plot about the Atlantis Themyscira war between Aquaman and Wonder Woman, Cyborg, and the Shazam kids and the human resistance fighters, including Lois Lane and Steve Trevor, have been removed. That sounds epic, dude. It's just like Aquaman and Wonder Woman going toe-to-toe, heads up, with Cyborg and the Shazam kids. Got Lois Lane and Steve Trevor in the mix. And apparently that war ultimately decimated Western Europe. So that feels like huge, grand scale. And I can understand why they probably could not fit this into this film, because I don't think they wanted it's a lot to take in, especially for a movie that you're trying to fit into 2 hours, that that you probably can't get away with a 3-hour epic given all the challenges that you've faced. Batman in the altered universe in the Flashpoint comics is Thomas Wayne, Bruce's father, who became Bruce after Bruce was murdered. Of course, Jeffrey Dean Morgan played Thomas Wayne in Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice in 2016, and he joked that Michael Keaton stole his job from him by appearing in this film as an alternate Batman. Very interesting concept, and I wouldn't have hated it if they tried. Spoiler: they did not include that in this film. I mean, obviously, given that it's the difference between the comics and the movie. But my God, could you imagine? It wouldn't have to be a long sequence or anything. Just a little, just show him in the suit. And I think people would be like, what? And there's plenty of that going on. And that was, there was a lot of criticism about the whole, you're on a carousel, it's a ride, and you just get the point. They're pointing at things and you go, ooh, and ah, and really minimalizing it and trivializing it. And for me, it was I personally enjoyed it. It's and given that what they want this movie to be in terms of how the evolution of the IP, it just, it was fitting. It just, the execution wasn't, the idea is solid in my mind. Maybe could have been worked in a little bit better. And the way they pulled it off didn't look that great, but the elements are there and the intention was there. The most notable, the craziest part of that Thomas Wayne as Batman with Bruce being murdered is that Martha Wayne, Bruce's mother and Thomas's wife, goes on to become the Joker. Oh, that's cool. In the Flashpoint comics, Flash and Batman rescue Superman from the U.S. government, not the Soviet Union, after a ship crashed in urban metropolis and not rural Kansas. So he's permanently imprisoned underground. Even after regaining his power, Barry can't travel back in time due to Zoom siphoning his speed. Only when Batman kills Zoom, he is able to do so and reverse the whole event, stopping himself from saving his mother. So the Flashpoint story arc consisted of a 61-issue run It crossed over with Booster Gold, which I know there were plans for a Booster Gold movie with the old regime at DC Films. I think it might still be in the works for DC Universe with James Gunn. I need to double check, and we might actually get to it by the end of this thing. And it has been adapted twice before, once for the Justice League Flashpoint Paradox, an animated movie, and then for the third season of the CW television series, The Flash. Ironically, the development and production of the 2023 Flash movie spanned all of 9 seasons officially. Unofficially, I mean, we're talking almost 20 years. And that 9 years coincided with the Flash TV series on the CW. That's how long the Flash on CW ran for, was the length of this product being in development and production. Oh boy, holy moly. So Muschietti and Hodson, Andy Muschietti and Christina Hodson, joined the film in July 2019, and pre-production began in January 2020. And then what happened? I feel like something big happened in 2020. And it'll come back to me. COVID, bro. Mother effing COVID delayed the project, as it did a lot of things. And so, it was supposed to debut in 2022. June of 2022 is eventually pushed to early November 2022. And then, was going to premiere on the same date as the original Batman, 1989, June 23rd, I want to say. But instead was moved up a week to coincide with the 10-year anniversary of Man of Steel releasing in theaters. So you can tell there's a lot of hype around this movie. It's been through a lot. The DCEU has been through a lot. I mean, we've hit on pretty much everything leading up to this movie, like all the stuff that's going on behind the scenes, and then we come to this, the hype portion of the movie, where it's finally coming together. It's real. It's happening. It's for the most part in the can, and now they're starting to test it out with audiences. So when an unfinished edit of the film was shown to a test audience in 2022, it purportedly gained some of the highest scores for a test screening of any Warner Brothers film since The Dark Knight. You've now brought The Dark Knight into the conversation with the best superhero movie of all time. And Warner Brothers was so pleased with the reaction that they confirmed the release date shortly thereafter. And that is probably why James Gunn said is on record as saying this is the greatest superhero film of all time. And now we have to question this movie and the reception to it, its box office, the critical scores, all that stuff we'll get to. You can see why people are now kind of questioning James Gunn to be like, whoa, dude, you've produced some of the greatest superhero movies of all time. 2021's The Suicide Squad. Guardians of the friggin' Galaxy trilogy. Like, you have given us some of the best, and you're calling The Flash the best, and this is what we got? Have you lost your goddamn marbles? Where you blipped out, and now you returned as a lesser than Nick Fury. Shout out Secret Invasion. Those are the kind of things that are running through your mind now as after you've ingested and absorbed and digested this movie. I was tempted to write a blog post, the 10 greatest superhero movies according to James Gunn, and put out like the 10 worst, superhero movies, like Green Lantern and, all that stuff. But it's like taking a step back after the initial hurt and sting and knee-jerk reaction of the movie, which I'm not in that camp that it's that bad. I'm just not. And I think with a few tweaks here and there, it could have been the greatest superhero movie of all time. But there are a lot of elements that you would have to change. Not too major outside of maybe Ezra Miller. But so I'm curious to see the unfinished edit of the film. Release the unedited cut. We got the Snyder cut, right? They have to, and it won't cost you as much as Zack Snyder's cut did cost you something like $20 million for reshoots and whatever, ADR. If they just really, can we just see the unfinished edit of the film that you showed to test audiences in 2022? Release that cut. What do you got to lose? If it had the highest scores for a test screening since the friggin' Dark Knight for any Warner Brothers film, we're not talking about superhero films, according to this, any Warner Brothers films, then you have to think that something got fucked in the edit. I would like to see the unfinished edit. Release the unfinished edit cut. Not only do you have James Gunn chiming in and saying the greatest superhero film of all time, I will quickly defend him devil's advocate style. In my opinion, he was in his final round of interviews to become the head of DC films, DC Universe films, whatever they're calling it, and rebooting the IP and all the franchises. I think the studio or Warner Brothers, whoever hired him, was like, listen, that being said, you're the guy. That being said, we still have these films that have to release, and you'd be doing us such a tremendous favor. AKA, we're not going to give you the job unless you say that these are good movies or great movies or the greatest movies. I not implausible to think that happened in a closed door meeting. Like, hey, we're going to give you the job, but you got to like help us out here, because otherwise these are going to tank. But the thing that goes against that style of thinking is he was asked about Aquaman and didn't really have a comment or didn't really praise it. So it's like, why praise the Flash and not the Aquaman, unless Aquaman 2 is just going to be like, and that's going to be coming out in December. And like, unless that's just going to be absolute, it's just like, we got to just get this out, you know? And we feel like of the two, the Flash is the stronger of the two. So let's put all our weight behind the Flash, knowing that Aquaman's not as, you know, is not really the one that's going to help us get to that next level, that next phase. But here's the one that kind of drives me nuts. And you can have your opinions about Tom Cruise all you want, but Tom Cruise was one of the first people to see the film, as he was sent a copy of it months before the theatrical release. He screened it at home in Beverly Hills and loved it so much that he called the director, Andy Muschietti, to congratulate him. Now, is that PR bullshit? Possibly. It could. That's possibly leaked. And Tom Cruise was like, okay, sure. If it allows you to get a movie done that I want to get done with you, sure. It just seems like that's how it goes. Like, if for this handshake to happen, I've scratched your back, now you scratch mine, that type of thing. So you have Tom Cruise getting behind it. You have James Gunn getting behind it. You know, all these people getting behind it. And it's like, and then the trailer comes out. It debuts during the Super Bowl. And we reveal that Michael Keaton in the bat suit saying the line. He said the line, say the thing. He said the thing. How do you not fully get on board? And that trailer won awards. They have awards for movie trailers, and it won awards. So it's understandable. Okay, the James Gunn thing makes sense. The Tom Cruise thing makes sense. The test screening makes sense because you see this trailer and you're like, oh my God, they friggin' did it. I don't know how they did it, but they did it. And listen, you want to know why the results are what they are? This was supposed to release in 2018. Had it released in 2018, it would have released before Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness and Spider-Man No Way Home, both introducing the multiverse concept idea to the world on film. You know, it's been, you know, in comics and TV and whatever. But in terms of film, movies, not really done or navigated to the extent that Spider-Man No Way Home did. So you get the Multiverse of Madness kind of, okay. Spider-Man No Way Home, one of my favorite superhero movies of all time. And it's because of the multiverse. And it's because of them being able to bring in the actors from other franchises into the universe. I mean, like, oh my God. Jamie Foxx, Alfred Molina, the Green Goblin. I mean, like, Willem Dafoe, like spoiler alert, friggin' Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire. You know, it's to bring them all together in a way that was cohesive and made sense, and everyone got their shine, their fair share. They pretty much nailed the multiverse thing. Multiverse of Madness, I think that they really left a lot on the table. And maybe they did that on purpose because they didn't want it to overshadow Spider-Man No Way Home or ruin Spider-Man No Way Home. But my God, they kind of left they could have done more with the. I did a very brief mini review of it, and they left a lot there on the table. So, that's another factor, I think, in and the reception of this movie. So, but that being said, I don't think we were. That being said, with Spider-Man and Doctor Strange having done it, it's like, okay, well, now this is DC's take and turn on it. And so I don't think it had been that storyline or that arc had been done to death. You know, now everyone's saying, oh, we're multiverse, you know, after this movie didn't really meet expectations for a lot of people. They're now saying the multiverse is everyone's multiversed out. And it's like we've run that into the ground, and now we got to come up with something original and new. And then so the DCEU, so the Super Bowl commercial actually takes place after the announcement that the DCEU would be scrapped in late 2022. James Gunn stated that The Flash and Aquaman will serve as a soft reboot to the DC franchise, which will now be known as the DC Universe. And any other DC films or shows outside of this new timeline will belong to the universe called DC Elseworlds, aka Matthew Reeves, or a la, i.e., example, Matthew Reeves, the Batman, and Todd Phillips, the Joker franchise, which has a sequel coming out soon with Joaquin Phoenix. So, and Lady Gaga. Whoa. So, multiple delays caused by director changes, COVID-19 pandemic, writer's strike, setbacks, controversies around Ezra Miller. It ends up being the 13th film released in the DC Extended Universe. And my hype heightened and continued all the way up until like the week before and the week of the release. You know, some people that I follow got advanced screenings, and the response was good movie, not the greatest superhero movie of all time. And my expectations came down and down and down. And I remember tweeting this after I saw another clip that they posted on like Twitter or YouTube showing more of the movie. And I was just like, I'm getting more of the movie and I'm still in love with it. I still think this is maybe it is the greatest superhero movie of all time. And then seeing all those reviews come in, I was just like, all right, well, I'm already disappointed. I'm still going to this movie. I already bought a ticket. I'm going to see it, but I'm already disappointed, which might've been a good thing. If I hadn't seen those and I had gone with the same level of hype I had back in February through pretty much May for this movie, and maybe it was good to get, bring it down a couple pegs. So what's the plot? What's the storyline? What are my thoughts about the storyline and the plot? We open with Barry Allen being late to work. Right, he stops to get a sandwich because he's low on calories. He's getting the alert on his smartwatch or watch saying low calories. And like Michael Phelps, which they made a Michael Phelps joke, he does need a tremendous amount of calories to support his ridiculous metabolism. And my God, I would love to eat like him. Wouldn't we all just love to eat like him and just still be shredded as fuck? And that's when Alfred calls. And this is Jeremy Irons' Alfred, who I think we can all agree, we all love Jeremy Irons and makes for a superb Alfred. I think people would probably say Michael Caine as Alfred is number one, but I would think that Jeremy Irons is a very close second. They did not do wrong in casting him there. So he calls Barry and says, we need your help. There's a bank robbery. And Barry's obviously like, why can't the rest of the Justice League help? And that's when they kind of cut to the different people and they say, well, Superman's stopping a volcano in Guatemala. Wonder Woman's doing this, blah, 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 blah. So, we're going to need you. And so Barry suits up. He tries to get a candy bar from bystander. That does not go according to plan. And he races to Gotham from Central City. So I had to look up where Central City was because I just assumed it was like smack dab next to Gotham City. It's like not even close, dude. Central City's in Missouri. And so he has to get to Gotham City, which, despite everyone from New York laying claim to Gotham City, is in New Jersey, at least in the DCEU. So that was a cool scene. I appreciated that we got some humor right off the bat with the sandwich guy. Could have been written to be funnier, of course. It would be nice to bring in like a comedian or two just to kind of do a spot check and say there's something funnier here. But the humor wasn't like atrocious, like no laughs. It got a couple chuckles out of me. But I still, and this has been commented on, so I don't know that I need to go into great detail, but Ezra Miller, when he runs, is so goofy. And knowing what the payoff that they did around that, it feels like it was definitely intentional for comic effect, but was the juice worth the squeeze, Like they made the joke towards the end of the film about it, but was that laugh big enough and good enough to justify it in the beginning when you're like, it's distracting. It's like, he seriously runs like this and they never explain why. It's like, well, I know it doesn't look aerodynamic and it goes against everything you've ever thought about running fast with your elbows out. Like normally you want to be tucked in like aerodynamic, but I don't know. I've never run at the sound of speed or whatever, sound of light, sonic speed, breaking this sound barrier. I don't know. I've never done it personally. So, the Flash, so he races from Central City to Gotham City. I thought that was cool. And then he's basically tasked with Batman finally comes on the scene and is tracking and chasing the bank robbers in like a Humvee or something like that. And the Ben Affleck as Batman is on the Bat Cycle, which, by the way, I don't want to spoil anything. If you were hoping, like when I watched the Super Bowl commercial, the Super Bowl trailer, there was a short clip that shows Batman on the Bat Cycle from behind. And I'm like, oh, fuck. No way. No way. He said he wouldn't do it. He said he wouldn't do it unless Christopher Nolan was involved. Yes, Christian Bale said that he would not be involved in any more Batman movies playing Batman or Bruce Wayne unless Christopher Nolan is involved. And now I'm seeing the Bat Cycle, which looks pretty much just like the Bat Cycle from the Dark Knight trilogy. From behind, we don't see his face. And I'm like, they got motherfucking Christian Bale to do this. I cannot believe it. They got Christian Bale to do this. So that, again, had to be intentional. And it got me hooked and it piqued my interest. So good on them for tricking and duping a lot of people who were expecting Christian Bale. Spoiler. Sorry. So he goes and chases the bank robbers in the Humvee. And the Flash is left to, as he puts it, be the janitor and clean up the mess left by Batman. And that's when he realizes that the building is collapsing, right? And there's a whole bevy of babies in this newborn unit nursery, along with a nurse. And of course, the building starts collapsing on that side and they start sliding towards the exit. And I was like, oh my God, they're really going to do this, huh? Now, any screenwriter who started out in screenwriting has been advised to read the book Save the Cat. And it's where you save, the idea is that you save the cat in the beginning of the movie and that kind of establishes you with the audience, right? It's like what gets the audience on board with your character and it heightens the mood, escalates everything and builds the tension and gets the viewer hooked. They took Save the Cat and they really multiplied it by 1 million. The idea of like a whole room of babies just flying out of a building, along with the nurse and a service dog, the old cherry on top of that like disaster Sunday. You have to applaud it. The ambition behind that. But that's where we get to our first taste of the awful CGI in this movie. Everyone to a T says that the CGI looks like cut scenes, transition scenes for a PS3 video game, which released in 2006. So maybe that makes sense considering how long this project has been in development. Yeah, it looked bad. The babies looked bad. The nurse, the service dog, it just all looked bad. But the idea and the concept is just so good. Like listen, it's over the top, but it's meant to be that way, right? It's it's a little bit of dark black comedy, right? Like, oh shit, they're really going to have him try and save all these babies. How the hell is he going to do it? That's the question I was asking, I was like, how the hell is he going to pull this off? Babies, nurse, service dog, all falling out of this tall building to their deaths, And so as we learn, the Flash can't move humans that great a distance too much, because then they get super sick, which there's a joke in the movie later in the movie that they pull off that speaks to that. He does basically what Quicksilver did in the X-Men, and this is what unfortunately has happened to the Flash, is these delays have cost it the novelty of the trick. Do you know what I'm saying? If this movie releases now, when did Quicksilver come on the scene in X-Men? Was it 2016? I think it was X-Men Apocalypse. I don't think he was in Days of Future Past. If he was in Days of Future Past, that was 2014. So we've already seen this trick done with Quicksilver. So it's nothing new. And I think that ultimately might negatively impact some people's views of this scene. But I got to put it up there as one of the most craziest, I don't know if you would say most inventive, but craziest action sequences. It's just the CGI stunk. If the CGI doesn't stink, I think you do put it up in the upper echelon, that top tier of best, craziest action sequences in a superhero film. But so the Flash has to slightly poke and tweak and just ever so slightly change how people are positioned and how things are going in order to pull it off. Otherwise, it could spell pretty serious side effects for the people involved. And en route, he's low on calories, right? And if he's low on calories, he isn't able to do his powers. So he has to he microwaves a burrito and eats it. He breaks into a vending machine, all while trying to save like a dozen or more babies, a nurse, and a service dog. And he pulls it off. Now, again, the CGI probably took a lot of people out of it. I tried to ignore it. And by ignoring it, I was able to embrace the absolute insanity of the scene. And I thought it was great and funny at the same time. So he pulls it off. He saves them all. And we're back in real time now. We're not in flash time. And the nurse is freaking out, screaming her tail off, because it's like, I was just falling to my death and now I'm just standing here and everything's all right. What the hell happened? And so, it probably broke her brain and she was losing it, screaming. And then Ezra Miller, as the Barry Allen, the Flash, says, "You've been through a traumatic experience. It's important to seek help. Mental health is important." I think we're all familiar with that, the Justice League. And I know what they're going for. And I kind of chuckled, but at the same time, I was like, oh man, Ezra Miller making a mental health joke. Like, I mean, you've heard the whole rigmarole about what he's been accused of and what he's been arrested for, or I should say, they've been accused of, they've been arrested for, what the offenses that have been tallied against them. Yikes, So I understand what they were going for. It kind of works, but at the same time, I can understand why people will be like, are you serious with that? So Barry gets a sandwich, but he's not happy, because he definitely sees himself as like this ancillary, marginalized character, which he has been throughout the DCEU. His introduction in the original Justice League in 2017 was not great. And also a lot of his scenes were cut, which Zack Snyder put into his cut, which definitely helped, gave a lot of depth to the character. And so, you can understand his positioning there, and you can understand why they wrote that into this script, because it was like, yeah, we kind of messed up the Flash. That was them admitting, yeah, we could have done a better job with the Flash. So he gets a sandwich. He's finally ready to go to work. He is late. He gets bitched out by his boss. He's ridiculed by his coworkers, a guy and a girl who come into play later on. But he does reconnect with Iris West, who's covering Henry Allen's retrial appeal. And so she's asking questions about his dad, and he kind of catches on to her scent and is like, are you asking as a friend, or are you asking as an official reporter? And so he eventually clams up and gets defensive, puts a wall up and says, no comment. He ends up revisiting his childhood home and remembers his youth with his parents, Nora and Henry, before Henry was wrongfully imprisoned for Nora's murder, all because the only evidence that would exonerate him is the security cam footage where it has him looking down and his hat is covering his face, so you can't clearly see it's him. But, that's basically what's kept him in prison. Here's my question. Why is Henry Allen in prison for what seems like more than 16 years. Because if we're to believe it's 2023, I don't know what the year is that we're in this movie. I assume it's 2023, or maybe it's further out. I don't know. But if Henry supposedly, if his mom dying occurred when Barry was a kid, and they show him as a kid, and he appears to be 10 to 13, that would put us 20 years ago, 2003? No, 2007, 2008. I don't know. It puts you in the early to mid, maybe late 2000s. I don't know. And it's 2023. So he's been in prison for at least 15 years, right? So I guess they just keep appealing. I don't know. Is there a limit to how many times you can appeal a murder or how many times you can be up for retrial? I don't know. It was that didn't connect with me initially until afterwards. I thought, wait a second. They're still talking like this just happened and he's been in prison for like a month. He's been in prison for like 15 years. And I guess they did address it when he gets on the phone initially in his inmate's costume. He says, I'm actually kind of grown. He tells Barry, you need to drop this because I've actually grown. I'm accustomed to the inside of the cell and I don't know what I would do outside the cell without your mother. So yes, they did mention that he was comfortable, but I do feel like they could have, I don't know, kind of explained it a little bit better. Like, this is still a news item. I don't know. While he has these memories and these flashbacks of his mother sings La vida te da sorpresas te da la vida. That's my horrific 8th grade Spanish. And that's Spanish for life gives you surprises. You get surprises from life. She sings that to Barry when he was a kid. She also calls him Miko, which is Spanish for monkey, which I liked. Although it confused me at first. It was like, is she calling him Mike? His name is Barry. Was he Mike Allen? He changed his name to Barry after what? So that chorus comes from a song called Pedro Navaja by singer Ruben Blades about a criminal who kills a woman stabbing her, which is foreshadowing as Nora dies that same way. Overcome by the emotions of reliving that memory, Barry accidentally uses this. He just takes off and runs as fast as he can. He's trying to run away from his problems, right? Or I don't know, who knows where he's running to. He's just running. He's got to get out of his system. Kind of like Forrest Gump. So he uses the Speed Force, quote unquote, to travel back in time to earlier in the day. I believe it was the baby saving scene when he kind of pokes his head in and looks around. I was like, whoa, holy crap. And then like comes back. And so he ends up spilling the beans to Bruce. So Ben Affleck is standing there. He's leaning up against his crazy expensive futuristic looking car that I don't even think is going to release to public. One of those joints, they like to do that to us. They like to tease us and then never release it. And so Barry's like, I can go back in time, save my parents. If you could go back in time, Bruce, would you save your parents? And Bruce is like, I wouldn't be who I am if my parents survived. I don't know who I would be. I don't, So he warns him about time travel and says there are going to be some harmful consequences. Like, don't do it. And it almost felt like he was speaking, like that was actually Ben Affleck speaking. That wasn't Bruce Wayne. And he was just speaking from experience there. Like, listen, I don't know who I'd be if this, that, or the other didn't happen. Would I currently be Bruce Wayne if XYZ didn't happen? So he's against it. He's anti-time travel. That's when Iris shows up right as Ben Affleck, Bruce Wayne is leaving. She comments on Bruce's expensive car, and Barry tries to lie and say it was an Uber. She's like, can I come up? Would you mind if we talk? And so he speeds up, cleans up his apartment real quick. And then she asks for a drink. He's like, yeah, of course. And he phases through the wall to get the drink. And I didn't notice this at the time, but the poster that was on the wall that he phases through is the same poster that you see in what's his face's cell when he uses it to cover the hole. Andy, when he's digging through the wall to escape through the sewer system. Same poster. Thought that was a nice little homage touch. It just went completely unnoticed by me. So he phases through the wall to get the beer. And of course, he goes to open and the beer explodes. Sexual innuendo through the roof. And I love how throughout that short scene, you start to see like it starts to unravel how he cleaned up the apartment. It was very easy, just threw everything into closets and wardrobes and they all come spilling out. So that was cool for comedic effect. So despite all this, he gets an idea. So when he's talking to Iris, he gets an idea. And that's when he's like, all right, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go back in time and save my mom. So he enters the Chrono Bowl, AKA the toilet bowl. This thing stinks. I mean, the worst of the worst CGI in this movie is the Chrono Bowl. It's this almost looks like a gladiator's arena to a certain extent. There's like, kind of the sands of time, which I thought was a nice touch in the middle. And Barry is in this bubble, which is called the Time Sphere, the Cosmic Treadmill. It's a bubble-like craft used to navigate time and space. So he enters that and enters the Chrono Bowl. I would say in terms of bad CGI, nothing really beats that one of the final scenes in Green Lantern when the Skarsgård as what's his face turns into like basically a huge tidal wave of feces. Like that looked pretty bad. That was the worst I've ever seen. There was some really bad CGI in Black Adam towards the end. This takes the cake. I mean, we're talking the year is 2022 when you were probably editing this and doing the CGI. I saw, and I commented on this on Twitter, on my Twitter feed, I saw a very short clip from Spawn, which came out in 1997. And that shit looked better than a lot of the stuff in The Flash. And that was released 25 years ago, 26 years ago. Like, what happened? And part of me thinks that they ultimately wanted this movie to do good. Like, let's just break even. And if we can make a profit, great. But let's not go overboard in trying to make this the greatest superhero movie of all time because we're rebooting it anyway. And maybe that was an edict from the top down from James Gunn being like, hey, I don't want to like get too in the weeds on this thing because we're going to pivot and we're going to turn anyway. So let's not get too crazy with the CGI. And like even I learned from Lights, Camera, Barstool, the Barstool podcast about movies, that Andy Muschietti has gone on record to say that that CGI was intentional. If it is intentional, I don't think no one in the audience picked that up. So if you see it and your initial reaction is, this is horrible, you have to comment on that in the movie. You have Barry say, whoa, why does everything look like a PS3 game? And then someone later, there's a line that says, maybe the Dark Flash says, or maybe 2013 Barry says, I get the PS3 thing. Like there has to be some kind of two lines, in my opinion. It's like the first line is, whoa, acknowledging it. This looks like are we in a PS3 game? To one line explanation of why it's a PS3 game. And maybe it is Michael Keaton in that spaghetti scene, which we'll get to. So he goes back to the day of Nora's death. He prevents it from happening because remember, it all revolves around his father having to go out to get the can of tomatoes that he forgot to get. And so when he leaves, that's when Nora gets stabbed and his dad arrives just after the killer leaves. And so he's covered in blood or DNA, blah, blah. Still don't understand how he's arrested and convicted. I don't know. Like, wasn't the kid? I guess Barry was upstairs trying to solve a problem, and that's where we were initially introduced to the whole if not all problems have a solution idea, right? They plant that seed. So with the tomato can if she has a tomato can, he doesn't leave. He's there, prevents the killer from killing his wife. So Barry Allen goes back into the supermarket and places the can of tomatoes in her cart. She checks out with it, blah, blah. So as he's returning to the present, thinking that will then His mom will then be alive, and then he can go back to the present. And he can have his mom again, and his dad won't be in jail. Everything's kumbaya. As he's trying to return to the present in the Speed Force, in the Chrono Bowl, we see this dark, mysterious figure who is like basically just running down the steps of the Chrono Bowl and knocks Barry out of that jump to the present. Where is he knocked to? Great question. He's knocked out of the Speed Force, ends up in an alternate 2013 where his mom is alive. And he finds his past self, a 19-year-old Barry, who's a freshman in college, and realizes he has arrived on this exact day that he's originally obtained his powers. Now, 19-year-old Barry says, oh, I got a date with Iris West. Like, I'm going to that date. And so older Barry is like, no, dude, can't do that. We need you to get your powers so that we can fix this. Because if you don't get your powers, like, I'm not going to be able to fix this. And that's when we learn, we're introduced to 19-year-old Barry, 2013 Barry, and he's annoying by most respects. Not smart, annoying, maybe spoiled. I don't know. But it begs the question, do loving, supporting parents create the worst versions of ourselves? I don't know, because you look at some of the most successful artists, entertainers, people in the world, and I don't know the percentages, I don't know the stats offhand, but like the parent situation wasn't always great, right? I don't want to say broken homes for everyone, but it was like adopted or not your traditional normal, like mom and dad are together and happy type situation, right? Outside of that kind of that upbringing, right? It feels like a lot of the people just come from like dad wasn't there and mom was addicted to whatever. And it's like, I don't know, you kind of listen to enough interviews with some very rich celebrities and it's like, oh, okay. All right. That's kind of was a factor. So, Bruce Wayne's parents dies, he becomes Batman. The Flash's mom dies, he becomes the Flash. It's like, so Barry, 2023, or I guess older Barry, and his younger self go to the Central City Police Department where Barry forces 2013 Barry to be struck by lightning to recreate the accident that gives him powers. In doing so, like the 2013 Barry is like, wait, fuck this. I don't want to get struck by lightning, and tries to escape. That's when older Barry holds him down. The lightning bolt goes through older Barry into younger Barry. Younger Barry gets the powers. Older Barry loses his powers. So this is the scene where we get to see the older Barry Allen trying to run fast and realizing he's lost his powers and he's running. Ezra Miller is running so goofy. And so that is the payoff to the setup at the early of the movie, because I honestly don't remember his running being that goofy in the previous movies, but it's been a while. So it's very possible that it was that goofy in the previous movies. And they were like, okay, well, we need to address this. We know it looks goofy, and here's the joke. Now, is that joke enough for us to like go back and realize, oh, that was a setup? Like, I don't know. I feel like it's few and far between realizing that. But so the younger Barry is struggling or older Barry is struggling to train younger Barry. Younger Barry is he's freaking 19, dude. I mean, honestly, I know people are saying that the 19-year-old Barry was annoying and blah, 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 and this and that. And it's like, I don't know if I'd be able to tolerate 19-year-old me. Like, I'm 42 now. And like to go back to 19-year-old me who was just somehow a volatile cocktail of cockiness, but also anxiety, nervousness, and stress that didn't really necessarily tap into and understand why mental health was so important and didn't take care of my mental health, and was so close to spiraling out of control, and had, testosterone, just like a libido, like all the things that the young studs have. You can start to understand, like, all right, think back, like, and that only impacts and affects and really applies to people of my age or older, right? If you are 25 and you're like, no, the 19-year-old is so annoying, like, how soon we forget, So it would make sense that the 19-year-old would be of a certain way. Like it's logic. Like he hasn't lost his mom. He has a loving mother and father. They love him and support him. And so maybe they baby him a little bit too much, that kind of thing. Like they're still doing his laundry, that kind of thing. But he is not living at home. He does live in an apartment. But so before we get to that, so we go to younger Barry's apartment and we see that his apartment is like well decorated. And so older Barry's like, whoa, this is nice. You do all this? And he's like, mom helped. He's like, of course mom helped. But it's at night and no one's there. That's when we start to see younger Barry try to like flex his muscle and do all the powers. And he ends up naked on fire in the middle of Central City main intersection. And so older Barry is like, God damn, you gotta learn, we gotta train, dude. You gotta learn how to control this thing. We can't have you doing that. So he's trying to like, older Barry is trying to just calibrate, right? He's trying to get used to this new alternate 2013. He's asking a lot of questions and younger Barry's like answering them. And so they end up at a bar and they see on the screen that awesome General Zod broadcast interruption sequence that I believe aired during the Super Bowl during that 2013 Super Bowl, which was friggin' cool and caused panic. But they're seeing that on the screen and it's his announcement that he's preparing to invade Earth. And so that's when they go back to Barry. So this is now the daytime. They're at the bar. They go back to Barry's apartment. It's daytime, morning-ish, maybe early afternoon. And older Barry's surprised to find roommates because I guess he didn't have roommates when he was in college. And we learn that there's a guy on the couch, some like heavyset dude on the couch, and there's like a guy and a girl in the bed. The guy and the girl in the bed turned out to be what eventually is his future coworkers at the crime lab. And they're not making fun of younger Barry. They're just kind of like they're still acting, I guess you'd say obnoxious, but it's like, put yourself in their shoes. Have you been in that position where it's like, I have no money. I probably drank a lot of cheap, bad alcohol the night before and smoked a lot of cigarettes or did a lot of cheap, like bad drugs. And now I'm waking up very late in the day and I'm hungover. Like that's pretty much how you would act at that age. And like, so that to me made sense. Some people were not big fans of the roommates and I'm like, this is kind of close to reality. Like this is what reality is for a lot of people of that age. I'm merely like, I'm an apologist because I basically did the same thing when I was that age. So they reveal that he keeps saying older Barry catches on to the fact that they keep saying Eric Stoltz was Marty McFly in Back to the Future. And he's like, no. Eric Stoltz? No, it was Michael J. Fox. Michael J. Fox was Marty McFly. They're like, what are you talking about? It's Eric Stoltz, dude. And so if you look in the background during that whole sequence where they're trying to basically, older Barry is trying to get a grip and like try and get a hold of the Justice League to like help them like thwart General Zod, you can see in the background on the computer is like a screensaver and it's the Looney Tunes, but Tunes is spelled Toons, not Tunes. So that's kind of another hint that things are different in this 2013, this version of 2013. So like I said, they're trying to reassemble the Justice League, but in this timeline, they are unable to locate Princess Diana, aka Wonder Woman. Victor Stone never got in an accident, so he doesn't turn into Cyborg. And Arthur Curry was never born. That was one of the bigger laughs from the audience when they call Thomas Curry. They track him down, which I thought was cool. They track down Thomas Curry in the lighthouse, and they're like, hey, can we talk to your son, Arthur? And he's like, my son, Arthur? You mean my cat or my dog, Arthur? My dog's name is Arthur. And they're like, no, your son, Arthur. And they're like, who is this? Who's prank calling me? He's like, well, didn't you marry, like, you're married to the Queen of Atlantis, aren't you? And so he kind of like turns to his right and you see in the background a woman who is for sure, I don't know, you don't want to judge, but not the Queen of Atlantis, clearly. And he's like, yeah, I wish. Like, I did not marry the Queen of Atlantis. So then that's when they realized that Arthur was never born. But they do, I don't know how it happens, but the girl, this is a pretty funny exchange. The girl is like, I am Batman. She says, I am Batman. And so that's when older Barry perks up and he's like, oh my God, Batman exists? And younger Barry is like, of course Batman exists. And so he knows, because he's aware, because he lives in the timeline where that's knowledge to him, that he knows who Batman is. And so they end up making their way to Wayne Manor, hoping to find Batman. And instead, they come across an alternate, older version of Bruce Wayne, which such a cool scene. Like when there's the Wayne Manor is a mess. There's stuff everywhere. There's like a random flip flop on the ground. I thought that was a great, nice little touch. And so as they're in the kitchen discussing, like, where is this dude? Blah, blah. That's when old man with long gray hair, long gray beard, who kind of looks like the Big Lebowski if he were in his 60s or 70s, busts out of the wardrobe unit and just starts, fucking shit up. And that's where younger Barry starts to use his powers to great effect. And we learn, and that's when we're introduced to Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne. This alternate 2013 Bruce Wayne, who has retired from crime fighting because Gotham City is the safest it's ever been. Which, such an awesome intro or re-intro to Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne. But I gotta say, so many questions, dude. It does lead to a lot of questions that they probably understood they couldn't get to. And it wouldn't have been enough to satisfy or fulfill anyone. I mean, and God bless the person who's able to come up with that scene where they can accurately explain what happened from 92's Batman Returns to The Flash in 2023, when we're talking about 31 years. What were you doing in those 31 years? So maybe, this movie's already getting criticized for having fan service out the ass. And so they probably were like, well, we don't want to do too much fan service there. Maybe we'll get to that in future films. But that said, that kind of feels like a missed opportunity. It's the safest it's ever been. Oh, really? So just after like these two incidents, big time incidents for Gotham City, we get it. The gears start turning. You're like, well, does that mean that Harvey Dent, who is played by Billy D. Williams in the original movies, does that mean he doesn't become Two-Face? And he is a mayor, and he does bring Gotham City back to a safe neighborhood type thing. And Batman's like, I don't think you need my help anymore. I'm retiring. I guess that's where, if they were like true DC fans, would probably able to wrap their head around or fill in the gaps, fill in the blanks, right? And so, okay, I can understand why they didn't want to go into too much detail. It's just the safest place. They didn't need him anymore, and that's great for him. But at the same time, it's like, so if you retired, I know you still live with the trauma from your parents and probably the trauma of dealing with the Joker and the Penguin and Catwoman and all that shit. But I guess it was like he just, in those 31 years, wasn't able to overcome whatever haunts him and live the life that he wanted. Kind of sad. Although I don't know. It seems like Bruce, it's like he seems okay. He seems at peace with it or okay with it. Other than the fact that there's like a little itch that he wants to scratch when it comes to Batman. Like he missed the action. It's like an athlete, an NFL player has to retire. Tom Brady can't retire. He just loves football too much. That's Bruce Wayne, Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne in this movie. So Bruce Wayne reveals, I don't know how he knows this. I don't know if they prefaced it too much. And this is where I tend to overanalyze and overthink. And I think maybe some other people do too, where it's like, well, you don't want to get too in the weeds with this time travel stuff. Like even Avengers Endgame, they were just like, you got to deal with it. This is what we're going with. These are the rules. And it's going to make sense, or you're not going to think about it in 5 minutes when we're doing all this cool shit. So I think they took the same approach. They were like, all right, yeah. So, there's multiple universes, multiverses, and it looks like cooked spaghetti, and like there are intersection points. But if you change something here, it only affects something in the future, but it also affects the past. So I thought that was, one of the simplest and most straightforward and best explanations that you can get for time travel. And I know it's become a requisite thing, right? With time travel movies, it's like, you got to explain it to a certain extent. But I think, is the viewing public growing tired of both time travel and multiverse, right? Because we've now done it. Like I said, we've covered it with Avengers Endgame and with Spider-Man No Way Home. And it's like, did the Flash take a new approach to it? Yes, ever so slightly, by saying it affects the past, the future, and the past, and showing like, okay, there are these events which are inevitable, right? So basically knowing that the person that's watching this movie has probably watched all the MCU movies. Like, if you're into superhero movies, you're going to see that. How could you not see those unless you're just a really psychotic DC movie fanatic? But so we understand that Thanos is a thing. And we understand that there are events that, there was that sequence in Infinity War Endgame where Doctor Strange is literally going through, you see him in that yoga pose or whatever, cross legs with his hands up with the fingers touching. And you can see that, like, okay, he's saying there's like a billion possibilities, and we're just looking for the one time where it works, and he's like unable to find it. He's going through that whole like gyrating, like almost seizure like movement, which is interesting because it kind of happens in this movie and in the later portions of this movie. But Doctor Strange, I guess, has different motives, and so I think his search doesn't take exactly the same toll on him as it does some other people. I don't want to spoil it. Well, I mean, I guess I don't know. I don't really think I'm really spoiling anything, am I? So yeah. So they're like, are you in? You understand the stakes here? You understand what's going on? Like, there are no metahumans, which is such a stupid, I don't know. I never agreed with the use of metahumans. I don't know why they were so opposed to superhumans or something else, but metahumans just sounds so dumb. I don't know if it's because Facebook became meta, or like meta to me has a completely other meaning, but like metahumans was just a bad way to go about calling these type of superheroes and superhumans. So he's like, well, we don't have no one to turn to. There, like, apparently there are no metahumans left. There aren't any. So we need your help. And so Keaton's Bruce Wayne passes. It's like, pass. So older Barry is like, fuck that. They walk outside. They go to this other like manhole cover that leads to the Batcave, and he takes the younger 2013 Barry to the Batcave. And I think younger Barry's like, doesn't Bruce care that we're doing this shit? And older Barry's like, don't worry about it. He's whatever. And so they end up kind of getting an argument about a whole bunch of mess of things that I think for a lot of critics and audience were like, we don't like that. But I think it at the same time was able to highlight like Ezra Miller's acting chops. Like, he's trying to portray this older person that has this knowledge and this wisdom and this motive, and versus this younger person who's more naive and innocent and brash. So yeah, I don't know, conflicted about that. It did feel like somewhat forced and maybe a little bit too long, but they're going to butt heads, right? There's going to be conflict there. So it's just a matter of how they pulled it off, really. In the Batcave, the alternate Barry, 2013 Barry, finds a cloth bag that laughs. He opens it and there's the Joker's laugh. And that was the Joker's bag that was found on Jack Nicholson's body at the end of Batman, 1989's Batman. So I thought that was a nice little touch there. Older Barry then over the intercom makes a plea to Bruce, not knowing if Bruce can hear him or see him or not, to help him find Kal-El after talking about the loss of his, talking about, younger Barry and his parents and everything that's going on. And, really laying out, pleading really with Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne. And so that's when Bruce finally acquiesces and is like, all right, for the record, this is nuts, but you want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. So they use a backdoor connection to NASA within the Batcave to locate a Kryptonian pod that was reportedly discovered in Siberia. I loved this sequence of Michael Keaton dressing up as Batman, still looking good. And I understand it's probably not him in that suit, but goddamn, he looked good in that suit. I still love that suit. I still know that there's a logistical issue with the cowl not being able to turn the head, and they address that. But he in that suit is the best looking Batman. That bat suit is the best. Him in that suit is the best. The way he operates and moves in that suit, the way he fights is the best. Robert Pattinson is a close second. I think Christian Bale is a close second. I think amongst those two, you could flip a coin, really. But I don't know. Again, I'm biased because of nostalgia, but goddamn, it was fucking cool. Now compare that to Ben Affleck fighting as Batman in the beginning of the movie when he's chasing Falcone in the Humvee, right on the bridge. And I'm watching that and I'm going, nope, this is why this is not succeeding. This is why this is not working for a lot of people. Is because, first of all, I thought in that chase scene, I legitimately thought that they like digitally added Ben Affleck's like mouth to the cowl. I don't even think that was Ben Affleck at all. Like in that chase sequence, I think they did that all digitally and not great. I don't know. The suit doesn't work for me on Ben Affleck. The look doesn't work for me. And it's probably because I haven't read enough of the comics to appreciate the references and why it looks that way, but I just can't get behind it. It just doesn't work for me. It doesn't look right. Out of all the bat suits that you have and all the Batman have appeared on screen, obviously everyone's going to point to Batman and Robin, like the bat nips and everything like that, as like being the worst. Okay. There's I think there's a pretty strong argument that Ben Affleck's bat suit is like next in line, very close to being the worst. So it's just like you put them side by side and it's just like there is no comparison here. Like Michael Keaton's Batman suit is fucking awesome. So I love the sequence because we get to see the Batwing in action. I love that both the berries have parachutes and Batman doesn't, and that they feature that in the trailer, but it still worked in the movie. Instead, he doesn't have a parachute. He uses his cape like a flying squirrel. And it's in the snow. I don't know if it was an intentional callback, but it was a subtle callback to Batman Returns when there were a lot of cool scenes in the snow. I love when they incorporate weather into the action. I think that's great. I mean, you know, obviously they try to do rain for Batman versus Superman and didn't necessarily come out like they would hoped. And it's hard to pull off. Admittedly, it's hard to pull off. But, you know, he uses his cape to shield bullets, which I thought was anytime he does this thing where he puts out his cape like bat wings and he able to block bullets, so boss. And a lot of people are comparing it to saying it's inspired by the Arkham Asylum video game, Arkham Knight, something like that, which I have not played, but I've heard it's gotten rave reviews for like people are dying for that storyline of Batman in Arkham Asylum to hit the big screen. I don't know if it's ever going to happen, but this was akin to that, adjacent to that, where it's like, okay, he's entering a confined space where someone's being held prisoner and he's got to break out. So they're able to locate a holding cell, and it's kind of no windows, obviously, and there's something in the middle. It's got a greenish hue, greenish tint. And so they find this woman. They don't find Kal-El, a man, Superman. They find a woman. And so they are like, well, all right, just pull her out. Like, we got to save her. We got to, like, I think there were some people that are like, we got to go. And I think the older Barry was like, no, we don't. We got to save her. We got to take her. And I think even Batman was like, no, we got to keep going. It's not her. We got to keep going. We're going to get caught. And we shouldn't, like, whatever. And so older Barry is the one who stepped in, who had lost his powers and was like, no, I can't let this happen. So we ultimately learn why she's so frail and decrepit and weak. But in the process of trying to get her out and escape and free her, young 2013 Barry, who has the powers and is wearing the suit, gets shot. And he's like, I didn't know I could get shot. And he's like, duh, you can get shot. But as they're escaping, there's a part or scene where Batman asks the Barrys and the woman how much they weigh together in order for his explosive that he plants on the bottom to work, to provide the sufficient amount of thrust to get them to the elevator. He asks them how much they weigh. And so that's a callback to when Batman, in 1989 Batman, when Keaton asked the same question of Vicky Vale. And she gets offended. And of course, she lies about her weight. So that was a callback to that. I thought that was cool. But you could see the way that Keaton's Batman moves and thinks and operates. Very interesting. It's not like a lot of it doesn't. It's like he's accounted for some things, but his ability to improvise and it's a little bit crazy. And I guess that speaks to Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne. Is like there's a little bit of crazy in him, because I don't know that you see a lot of what Michael Keaton's Batman do in a lot of the other movies. So they're able to get outside where the sun is. And so that's when we realize, Kara, the woman that they freed, she catches some rays and she kind of comes back to life. The color in her skin comes back and her face. She's looking a lot healthier. And she goes, and then we see her floating in the sky. And we're like, okay, we get it. You're a Kryptonian. And she just goes apeshit on these Russians. And as good as the scene was, probably one of the top scenes in the movie, and just the way that she just dominated, I thought that was a phenomenal way to introduce the character. It was supposed to be a lot gorier, apparently, and they had to cut it down and dial it down and water it down, because otherwise it would have landed an R rating. Again, if this is something that they actually went through the process of doing, who knows what to believe, but if they actually went through the process of doing all that, and that exists somewhere, you got to give us an R-rated version or an unrated version of this movie at some point down the line. So she fucks shit up, which was awesome. And I think I've watched Man of Steel. It's been so long. I don't even remember if I watched it from start to finish, but that looked cool. And that was like, this is what a lot of the Superman movies I wish did. And I don't know that they've done it. And again, this might be a thing that happened in Man of Steel that I just I've forgotten about or blocked out. But it was like, it kind of reinvigorated my interest in Superman or Kryptonians, super people, is seeing her just go nuts on these, I guess, assumed military personnel. So after they rescue her, they go back to Wayne Manor, and that's when the woman explains that she's Kara Zor-El, aka Supergirl, which she doesn't call herself Supergirl, and I don't think anyone refers to her as Supergirl, but that's, I guess, what we're going with. She's Supergirl. And she explains that she is the cousin of Kal-El, who was lost as an infant as they were trying to escape Krypton, as it was, I guess, the hostile takeover or exploding. And so she has no clue where he is. And so that's when older Barry asks Bruce to get his powers back. They try to recreate the original accident with the lightning and the chemicals and the whatnot. And they use a bat kite, which I thought was an interesting touch. Kind of got a little bit of a laugh out of me. It's like, even his friggin' kite is shaped like the bat logo. I mean, it's a sick bat logo. It's the best bat logo by far. I mean, that's why you still see it on t-shirts. That's why you still see everyone rock that Batman logo. It is the best. They have not been able to recreate it or tweak it to make it better. It doesn't get any better than that. So they use the bat kite and it fails, almost kills older Barry. And that's when Kara comes along, picks him up, flies him up to the sky, and he gets struck by lightning again. Looks like he's died for sure this time as he's laying there. And then he's able to come back to life. And revives his powers. So he's got his powers back, and he gets his old suit back. So the younger Barry's like, here, you should have the ring that produces the suit, and I'll come up with my own thing. And so he ends up taking one of Michael Keaton's Batman's old suits and modifying it, and he cuts off certain things. And when he cut off the cowls, I think that got a laugh from some DC fans who are probably not a fan of the ears on the cowl. Sorry, he cut up the ears on the cowl. And I think a lot of like Batman fans don't like it or something. I love it. I think it looks cool, but it does, like, what purpose does it serve? And I wish that there was like just a one-liner explanation of like, well, actually it's like antenna for super radar. I don't know. Something that makes a little more sense than that. That was off the top of the dome. But I think explaining the ears and the cowl would make it, just bring it back. I miss it. The really short ears on the Adam West cowl, and I think the Ben Affleck cowl are just like, I don't know. It just doesn't hit for me. So they go to fight Zod, right? Zod's in the desert. He was trying to negotiate something with the military out there, and that went awry. You saw him take out the corporal general, who maybe becomes Martian Mindhunter. Was that a thing? I read that somewhere. So they're in the desert, and so that's where the younger Barry, older Barry, Kara, aka Supergirl, and Michael Keaton's Batman go to the desert to take him on. It's interesting that, like, on their way there, younger Barry's wearing Michael Keaton's Batman cowl, notoriously can't turn the head, and younger Barry turns his head, and you could see it, like, the mask gets all messed up to show you, like, yeah, we get it. Like, he can't turn his head. And so eventually, I think that's when older Barry, when they're on the ground, like, comes over and like rips the cowl so that he can turn his head. During the battle with Zod, that's when Kara learns that General Zod intercepted Kal-El's escape pod when Kal-El was just an infant, and killed Kal-El when they tried to retrieve the growth codex that is needed to terraform Earth into Krypton. And so that's when Zod reveals that the codex is actually within Kara. The two fight, and Zod overpowers her, kills Kara, and obtains the codex from her blood. While that's going on, Michael Keaton's Batman tries to take out the spaceship and is shot down and dies, right? Dies in Barry's arm. Barry's like apologizing. And I think Michael Keaton said something to the effect of like, I'm sorry you didn't get to blah, blah, blah. And he's like, but I did. And so that felt like, okay, we finally have given closure to Michael Keaton as Batman, I think. The way the original version was supposed to end, which we'll get to, I don't think that was the case. But this feels like, okay, yeah, they have made the decision to move on, but they did want to give a fitting end closure to Michael Keaton's version of the Batman. And so that did feel like that. And it didn't feel like, what was it called? Sanguine? I don't think that's the term. Saccharine? Didn't feel like too overly, whatever, melodramatic or gushy. It felt right. So that's when younger Barry is like, we need to fix this. We're getting our asses handed to us. Batman and Supergirl are dead. We can't let this happen. We got to go back in time and save them. And so that's when the two Barrys travel back through time to save Batman and Supergirl. But they realize no matter how many times they try, and they try a bunch of times, it's just gonna happen. It's one of those inevitable events that Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne stated when he was doing this whole spaghetti thing with the time travel and the multiverse thing. He's like, there are certain times where the spaghetti noodles cross, right? And when they intersect, those intersection points are gonna happen no matter what. Like, they have to happen. They're inevitable. You cannot change those. For every problem, there's not always a solution, right? That whole mentality. So older Barry kind of catches on to this, and he's like, that's right. We're not going to be able to change this. But younger Barry refuses to listen. And so he keeps going back and keeps going back and keeps going back and keeps trying. And then that's when the multiverse starts to collapse on itself. Now, the way that they portrayed the multiverse, the look was just Woof, dude. And of course the Chrono Bowl is involved. Like it's taking place kind of like you can see through the Chrono Bowl. Outside the Chrono Bowl are all these different what look like planets of different colors. And we kind of zoom in into the different planets and we get to see like, oh, there's Adam West's Batman and there's the original Flash and there's the original Superman. And so we see all those different versions, planets, worlds, and they are like about to collide with each other, right? So they're colliding. And in that multiverse collision, the original Superman was played by George Reeves. No relation to Christopher Reeves, I don't think, which came out in the early 50s. Christopher Reeves Superman, which came out in the mid to late 70s or the late 70s, along with Helen Slater's Supergirl, who had her own movie in 84. Adam West Batman, who we mentioned, 1966 can be seen, the original Flash, as I mentioned. And then they also they gave a shot of Nicolas Cage as Superman. And it's like, for anyone who's kind of like in the know, there was supposed to be a Nick Cage as Superman movie called Superman Lives with Tim Burton directing. And it was supposed to come out in 1998. It was produced in 1998. Never saw the light of day. It was canceled right before they were supposed to officially start shooting. 3 weeks before filming was supposed to start. There were teaser posters designed. There's footage. There's a documentary which I cannot find anywhere online or streaming called The Death of Superman Lives, which is a documentary about the whole process and what went wrong. I guess Kevin Smith was involved, possibly a screenwriter on that movie. And it was ironically canceled due to the box office failure of 1997's Batman and Robin. I think that was one of the factors or variables. I don't think that was the entire reason why. But so when they put the spotlight on Nick Cage's Superman, again, really shitty CGI. It's just like horrible CGI. He's facing off against a giant spider. So this is because producer John Peters insisted to screenwriter Kevin Smith when he was brought in for revisions that the third act featured the Man of Steel battle the fiercest killers in the insect kingdom. Peters would eventually get his giant spider years later in the form of the steampunk spider tank in Wild Wild West, which came out in 1999. But the idea of like Spider-Man fighting a spider, yeah, it was kind of like, oh, this is interesting. I don't think I can see why that wasn't made. Like a spider, huh? So we find out that the dark, mysterious figure that knocked Barry out of the time sphere, Speed Force bubble in the beginning of the movie, towards the beginning of the movie, that figure returns, and it's revealed that that's the future version. That's the Dark Flash. And, as 2013 Barry kept going back and trying to save Batman and Supergirl, he would come back to the sphere and he would have like a different thing kind of like stuck in him. Because the first time he goes back, there's a huge saber sword thing that goes into his arm and sticks, but then he's able to use it to his advantage. And so every time he returns, he has like a different thing that's been added to his costume, his outfit. And so then that's when we learn, they're like, you look familiar. And so that's the future version. Dark Flash is revealed to be the future version of 2013 Barry, who has now been to like years and years later. Well, I guess it ages you, right? If you keep time traveling, it ages you more and more and more and more. So it's impossible to tell how old he really is, but he looks really old. And so he still believes he can save the world from Zod and prevent the deaths of Bruce and Kara, and has been doing it for, I guess he's billions of attempts, similar to what Doctor Strange was doing in the multiverse, in Avengers Endgame. And so I guess the difference is that he's more emotionally driven than Doctor Strange, where Doctor Strange is a little more pragmatic, practical about everything, and is like, I'm exploring and searching. I'm not trying to really, I'm not pressing, whereas Dark Flash is like emotionally driven and probably making a lot of mistakes along the way because of that, because of his passion, letting his emotions get the best of him. So Dark Flash explains that the casual loop paradox that led to his own creation grows angry when Barry reveals his intention to reverse the changes to the timeline by letting Nora die. So the Dark Flash attempts to kill the older Barry, but it ends up the 2013 Barry, younger Barry, understands, finally kind of clicks for him, right? And there's some serious character development for the younger 2013 Barry. I know it was kind of here and there, bits and pieces, but like he goes from being this kind of ignoramus to now like understanding he needs to sacrifice himself in order to make things right. And so he ends up doing that. He jumps in front of the Dark Flash, his older version of himself, the older version of himself, and sacrifices himself to save the older Barry, 2023 Barry. And that's when you see the Dark Flash dissipates, kind of like getting blipped a little bit into dust, turns into dust. So the older Barry at this point, younger Barry passes. Older Barry understands what he has to do. So he goes back to the grocery store, and the tomato can that he initially put in there, because you see that happen, he sees himself put, it's kind of like Back to the Future 2 in a little bit. He sees himself put the tomato can while his mom's not looking in the cart. He then goes up to her, and she doesn't recognize him, or does she? She's kind of like, you look familiar. But again, he's now, if he was 10 when her mom got murdered and he's now 30, it's like a 20-year gap. So it's like, would you recognize, if you're a mom, would you recognize? I don't know. I think she did. And I think she kind of understood what was going on. I don't know. That's what I'm believing. So he talks to her, and he's able to finally say goodbye to her, because he wasn't able to before. He gives her a big hug, a lot of tears, very emotional moment. I had some dust in my eye. And we're reminded not every problem has a solution. And so he's able to take the initial step to come to terms with his mother's death. I don't know that everyone really does get that. So we were able to literally go back to the future, and Henry Allen's trial or retrial or appeal, I don't know. I mean, it's been a friggin' decade plus, almost 2 decades since he has been convicted of the murder. We see video evidence from the security cam that shows him looking up this time. So while he was looking down and covering his face, this time he's looking up, he shows his face, and so he's able to be exonerated. And that's when we kind of put 2 and 2 together and realized that Barry had placed the tomato can on the top shelf, whereas before it was on the bottom shelf, and the guy was looking down. He was on the top shelf, so Henry Allen looks up, and so he's freed. So he's exiting the courthouse. All's well, all's good, right? Everything's back to normal. At least he can't save his mom, but at least he can save his dad. And that's when he gets a call from Bruce Wayne, congratulating him, saying, way to go. I'll be there in a minute, but just really happy for you and proud of you. And so the same car from before pulls up. Remember when Barry was talking to Bruce Wayne, leaning up against his very expensive car, which Iris West commented on as she entered, like, whoa, got some fancy friends. That same car pulls up. And so the expectation, I guess, is that it's going to be Ben Affleck as Bruce Wayne. And I'm not to brag, not to boast. I'm like butter on your breakfast toast. But when he gets the call from Bruce Wayne and I hear the voice, I'm like, that doesn't necessarily sound like Ben Affleck. Interesting. And then when the car pulls up, I'm like, oh, they're zooming into the car door. Yeah, we're going to get a different Bruce Wayne. And so in my head, I'm thinking, shit, man, is this where Christian Bale appears? Like, is this, they were saving it for this? That would be unbelievable. And instead, Bruce Wayne approaches Barry Allen. Barry Allen's confused, like, who's this? It's revealed to be George mother friggin' Clooney, dude. George Clooney as Bruce Wayne is a result of Barry's timeline change with the friggin' tomato can, dude. It's like the butterfly effect times a million. So yeah, that was the big twist, which apparently they kept very hush hush, and it's that's, you got to applaud them for that. The ability to and we'll get into the revisions to the film's ending in a little bit, but their ability to pull it off is that deserves recognition. Now, did it look great? No, of course not. Again, the intention, the idea is good. The execution was poor. I mean, the special effects end of the deal was poor. I think the execution of the acting and it still gave me chills. Like, it was still like, oh my God, George Clooney's Batman. And I think there is something to be said about why Clooney. Clooney has been widely considered the worst Bruce Wayne Batman. And he's apologized for it, even though he doesn't have to apologize for it. He's put in some really bad circumstances. But this is, by having Clooney as Bruce Wayne at the end of The Flash with Ezra Miller, this is like them saying, yep, that was the darkest timeline. This is the stuff that, yep, that's where we were. And we're now going in this new direction. So it's basically relying on you, the fan, talking directly to the fan and being like, yeah, see, remember when George Clooney like killed not only Batman, but Superman? And then Christopher Nolan gave us Christian Bale as Batman like 8 years later and everything was better again. Remember that? Well, that can happen again. So it was like, to me, that was why. And kudos to Clooney for doing it. I thought it was very cool of him to do it. Very cool. And very apropos for the situation. So I think that was a result of James Gunn stepping in and being like, but we need to make sure that people know, like, this shit not really continuing. Like, this is our way of saying goodbye to that and putting a not a nail in the coffin, but a nail in the coffin. Like, we're closing the book on this chapter of the DC Films experience. We're doing it with George Clooney and Ezra Miller. It doesn't get any more appropriate than that. So I thought that was cool. And then there's the post-credit scene. No mid-credit scene. The post-credit scene was Barry pulling a very drunk Arthur Curry, played by Jason Momoa, out of the bar and walking home. And, you know, Arthur Curry is stumbling around and like not making a lot of sense, jibber jabber, possibly because he's a drinker and that's what he does, which, you know, good for him. But also because he probably can't wrap his head around the multiverse thing, which Barry is trying to explain to him. And like, and that post-credit scene is just a further like layer or stamp of approval. Like, just so you guys, like, in case it wasn't clear, this all stuff can happen. It's totally acceptable. And we're pivoting. Like, some things will change and things will stay the same. That's why we're calling it a soft reboot. But I don't think people got that. Like, if I didn't read an article about it, I would not have got that from that post-credit scene. It was too quick, and it just didn't click for me that that's what that was. But reading the article, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Again, good intention, good idea, execution, not exactly there. So what were the revisions to the film's ending? So George Clooney reprising his role as an alternate Bruce Wayne due to Barry's actions changed multiple times during post-production due to the constant change of leadership in 2022. The original ending shot for the film, conceived by Toby Emmerich and Walter Hamada, who were the co-heads of DC Films, would have Keaton's Batman as well as Calle's Supergirl continue existing in the new timeline, but erase Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck's roles of Superman and Batman, respectively, from the DCEU continuity. There were plans for a sequel to The Flash before building up to a Crisis on Infinite Earths film in the future, which would have been, I would have tuned in for that. I would have watched that. And I still think that's going to happen at some point down the line. And when, it's going to be like 10 years from now, but it's going to be, if they do it right, it's going to be cool. And that's despite the fact that the CW has already done that adaptation in 2019, 2020. But as we've learned from DC, it's like, they just don't, the CW is its own thing and it has like no relation to what's going on the big screen. They wanted to keep Keaton and Calle. And so Keaton would have been the connecting thread to the Batgirl film that was then in development, and where Keaton was going to reprise his role of Batman in that movie, and it was canceled in August. So then after the merger of Warner Media and Discovery in 2022, Emmerich and Hamada are gone. Michael DeLuca, Pamela Abdi took over, and they decided to keep Henry Cavill with the continuity and reshoot the ending. And so Cavill shot his part for the ending, along with his cameo for Black Adam, which we did get to see So that Black Adam cameo was in September 2022 that it was shot. I think it was released in October 2022. So it was very close together. And then Gal Gadot also filmed the scene for that ending in The Flash, featuring the both of them. It was to drum up interest in the planned Man of Steel sequel and the third Wonder Woman movie, both of which have been canceled. So in a matter of months, weeks, November 2022, James Gunn and Peter Safran become the new heads of now DC Studios. And they want to reboot. Cavill's no longer expected to reprise his role. Scene was cut. And that scene with George Clooney was shot in January of 2023. That is astonishing. Again, it's just one scene. It was very quick, maybe a minute. But at the same time, it's like to film that, keep it under wraps, especially for 6 months for the premiere in June was, you got to applaud that. In October 2022, a month before, a script for a Flash sequel had been written by David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick, longest name ever, who also wrote the Aquaman movies. In the event that the Flash performed well, the script included Keaton's Batman and Calle's Supergirl. So they had plans, big plans for Michael Keaton's Batman and Sasha Calle's Supergirl. Sasha Calle's? That's not her name. Yes, it is. Warner Brothers was not expected to retain Miller for future movies because of the actor's controversies and legal issues. Although some executives were open to continuing with Ezra by January 2023 since they began treatment for mental health. But later in the month, Gunn and Safran said there was potential for Ezra to reprise their role in the new franchise, the DC Universe, but a decision on the character has not been made. I don't know what it would take for them to continue to consider that, but I would judge by this movie's performance and the critical reception and everything that's going on that it's probably best to just move on. But the events for this movie, The Flash and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, are going to set up DCU's first film, which is Superman Legacy, which is going to release in 2025. I don't even think it's going to release in 2025. Andy Muschietti, the director, said in May 2023 that if he and Barbara Muschietti were involved in a sequel, they would have Ezra Miller return and believe there was not another actor who could portray its iteration of the character the same as Miller did. Well, yes and no. No one can probably do what Ezra Miller did for the character, but at the same time, there are plenty of other actors out there who can do the Flash. Plenty. So I guess in June, it was reported that a sequel could happen if the film managed to come close to the box office revenue of The Batman, which released in 2022. For reference, The Batman in 2022 grossed $771 million worldwide against a $185 to $200 million budget. So I would consider that a success. Now, The Batman was the seventh highest grossing film of 2022, which, not exactly Dark Knight numbers, and the second highest grossing film since the beginning of the pandemic, which is something to be, that's good. There are claims of a net profit of $177 million, but if I do the math, it just seems like that's, I don't know, should be a higher profit than that. So what was the box office projection for The Flash, right? If they're expecting numbers a la the Batman, if it's Batman numbers, they're going to do a sequel. If it's not, no sequel. The Flash was initially projected to gross between 68 and $85 million from 4,200 theaters opening weekend. And it was expected to gross $85 to $95 million internationally for a global opening of around $155 to $165 million. But as of the Monday after its opening weekend, The Flash only grossed more than $60 million in the US and Canada and less than $75 million in other territories for a worldwide gross of $136 million. As of today, I looked it up. It's now June 25th, about a week later, and it's grossed almost $211 million worldwide. So it's almost breaking even depending on what that range. So my guess is that's a no to the sequel. A lot of the trivia items that I came across on IMDb, I incorporated into the review, but there were some that I left out, like Grant Gustin that denied the report that his Barry Allen character from the TV series The Flash would be appearing in the movie. I think that's a miss. There's got to be a healthy chunk of fans watching that movie on the. I mean, it ran for friggin' 9 years, 8 seasons or whatever. Just throw it in there. It's like literally a day shoot, maybe. I don't know. I just, it's stuff like that. It's kind of like missed the mark. And as we mentioned, Henry Cavill filmed the cameo of Superman, but it was cut after James Gunn announced the new DC universe. And Cavill's plans to return the franchise were canceled. Like, what a difference, like, 2 months make. Literally, like, 60 days, maybe. Less than 100 days. It went from, okay, we've got that. It feels like we're on the upward swing or trend. Superman cameo, Black Adam, feels like okay. Then they're building towards Black Adam versus Shazam. And then Shazam Fury of the Gods comes out, and that disappoints. And now The Flash, by all accounts, disappoints financially. I mean, there are some people, honest to God, if this did not have Michael Keaton as Batman, maybe I still go see. I don't know. I don't know if I'd go see it. And I thought it was interesting. There was an interesting cameo from Nicolas Coster-Waldau, who played one of the Lancasters. Tyrion? No, not Tyrion. Jaime Lannister on Game of Thrones. He was the bystander who was eating the pizza slice that got stolen by the young Barry when he was first, receiving his powers. So I thought that was an interesting cameo. I guess he worked with Muschietti on some stuff in the past. So what in the world did the critics say? Well, Metacritic assigned the film a weighted average of 56 out of 100 based on 54 critics' mixed or average reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B on an A+ to F scale, tied with Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice, which is interesting to say the least. I would put this above Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice. Holy crap. It's the lowest graded DCEU film. Post-Track reported 77% of filmgoers gave it a positive score, with 59% saying they would definitely recommend it. I would recommend it. I mean, if you're a fan of superhero movies, if you're a fan of Michael Keaton's Batman, I don't know how you don't see it. 66% of all critics gave it a positive review with an average score of 6.3 out of 10, a little low. 51% of top critics gave it a positive review with an average rating of 5.8 out of 10. I'm going to put it above those two numbers. It's not much more above 6.3 out of 10. I would probably put it closer to the 7 out of 10. I think I did give it a 7 on IMDb, but like they don't allow you to do decimals. So it would be a high 6, low 7 in that range. The critics' consensus was The Flash is funny, fittingly fast-paced, and overall ranks as one of the best DC movies in recent years. Glenn Weldon of NPR said, like its main hero, The Flash doesn't hide how hungry it is to be seen as worthy, even though it spends much of its time running on empty. I thought that was kind of clever. Michael Phillips of the Chicago Tribune said Keaton is the one who brings both effortless gravity and subtle levity to a film that without him wouldn't have much of either. I mean, I just said it, 100% agree with that. I don't know that this film is anywhere near close to good if he's not involved with this. I just don't know what it would take. Matt Singer of Screen Crush said Michael Keaton's Batman Returns saves the movie. Yes, agree. And then Charlotte O'Sullivan of the London Evening Standard said this is one of the best superhero movies of the 21st century so far. Just sit back and enjoy the flashes of greatness. I mean, what could have been, right? Release the unedited cut of the film. Like what in the world led everyone at that friggin' screening to lose their minds and think this was the greatest superhero movie of all time? Wow. Rolling Stone's David Fear said The Flash is by far the best movie to come out of this modern post-Nolan Warner's DC collaboration. That I don't argue with as much, just because the post-Nolan Warner DC collaboration has not been great. So it's not a very high bar to pass. So I wouldn't, and we're getting to how The Flash ranks amongst the other DC films, but I don't think that's as preposterous as the best superhero movies of the 21st century so far. I mean, given what's happened after Endgame, you want to talk about post Endgame, 2019 to 2023, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, that's your top one, right? Maybe, and then maybe it is The Flash. One of the most spectacular and frustrating mixed bags of superhero blockbuster era, The Flash is simultaneously thoughtful and clueless, challenging and pandering. It features some of the best digital FX works I've ever seen, some of the worst. If this is truly the last stop on the Snyderverse Express, then it's a respectable way to go out. And that's the one. That's from IGN. That's the one I agree with. And I also agree with the best digital FX work and the worst. I mean, the stuff, and I think people are pointing this out. Most of the Batman VFX are just perfect, and then everything else stinks. Although Supergirl's good too. I gotta give this the Supergirl. So it's like they really like, okay, the three main characters, let's just nail those, and the rest can go take a long walk off a short pier. 85% of the verified audience gave it a favorable review with a 4.2 out of 5 rating. 80% of all audience gave it a positive review with a 4.1 out of 5 rating. This is where you could persuade me to say a 4.1 or a 4.2, but I would probably aim closer to a high 3 out of 5. So technically on Rotten Tomatoes, it would be fresh, quote unquote. Like you have to do a 3.5 out of 5 to get fresh. I would put this at like a 3.7, 3.8. So I consider it fresh, barely. So where does The Flash rank in the DC universe, according to Rotten Tomatoes, Tomato Meter? So if we go just by the critics' scores, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th. At 66% of the critics, right? It is below Peacemaker, which is number 1, Wonder Woman at 2, Suicide Squad, the 2021 version at 3, that's James Gunn. Peacemaker is also James Gunn. You can kind of see a trend here. There's a reason why they picked James Gunn. Number 4 was Shazam, the original Shazam, which a lot of people loved. Birds of Prey, which I liked. At number 5, Zack Snyder's Justice League at 6, and then The Flash below it at 7. I would honestly put The Flash in this current setup. I would put The Flash above Zack Snyder's Justice League and above Birds of Prey and possibly above Shazam. I would put it above Shazam. So I'd put it third, behind Peacemaker, Wonder Woman, and Suicide Squad. Peacemaker obviously is a TV show, so it's actually like the third best DC movie. If we go rankings by audience score, where the Flash ranks, so Zach's, this is where the Snyder fans are just, they're passionate, they're fervent. So if we go by audience score, which with DC movies, it's kind of a crapshoot. It's like, whoa. Zack Snyder's Justice League is number 1 at 93%. Peacemaker at 89%. Black Adam at 88%, which I don't think there's been a bigger disparity. Well, I guess than like both Black Adam and Shazam Fury of the Gods had probably two of the biggest disparities. And this is commonplace for DC movies on Rotten Tomatoes, where like the audience score is so much higher than the critic score. And that happened with Black Adam and Shazam Fury of the Gods. And then you have The Flash. So if we're going by audience score, I would put The Flash below the Peacemaker and above Black Adam and Shazam Fury of the Gods for sure. Although I haven't seen Fury of the Gods, so I don't really know. But just by looking at that trailer, I was like, wow, they just did not give a shit about this movie. But for all intents and purposes, I believe that The Flash accomplished what it set out to do. Now, that initial objective changed a lot over the course of its development and production. But ultimately, in that last final home stretch, especially when James Gunn was named co-head of the new studio, they were like, this is perfect. This is exactly what we need to turn the corner, turn the page. So it was not a perfect execution by any means. I think it was, in terms visually, effects wise, it was a very subpar, below average execution. In terms of story and trying to set out, like, did it accomplish what it needed to do to get us to connect the two franchises, universes, whatever you want to call it? Did it accurately make the handoff from DCEU to DCU, from previous heads to James Gunn and Safran? Did it make that handoff? Was it shaky? Sure, but it made the handoff, and that's all that needs to happen. I just love Michael Keaton as Batman. So I'll end it with that. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. And we'll talk to you soon. And remember, not every problem has a solution.